Now going to lead right into the meeting. The first report will be myself giving the NRO Activities Report. Okay, NRO, Number Resource Organization. Our goal, to be the flagship global leader for collaborative internet number resource management as a central element of an open, stable, and secure internet. Yes, we'd like to make sure that the internet numbers are appropriately managed, and that's what we coordinate towards. Established by an MOU in 2003, we coordinate the RIR system, we promote the multi-stakeholder model, we fulfill the role in ICANN. We are the address supporting organization. You can go to nro.net for more details. So we have an executive committee made up of the executives of each of the 5 RIRs, myself, Paul Wilson, Alan Barrett, Axel Pollack, Oscar Rollins. And we rotate the duties of the NRO among the executive committee. So this year I'm the chair of the NRO, and Paul Wilson's vice chair, Alan Barrett is our treasurer. Then you get 2 years to relax, and then you're back into the fray. The secretariat is hosted by AP Nick, executive secretary Herman does a wonderful job. We have Susanna, who's also helping him out, and they handle this enormous amount of communication that the NRO does to and from bodies that want to talk to the RIR system. A lot of this is ICANN, but sometimes it's other bodies. We also have coordination groups underneath, which are responsible for helping us align our activities. So the communications activities, the engineering activities, the registration services teams. When we do things like change the stats file or change the transfer logging, or when we do some sort of other coordinated change across the registries, the engineering functions are coordinated via these teams, the communication, the registration services changes. These groups meet to keep us acting like one global registry. We publish a number of things which those groups produce, like the Internet Number Status Report, which you heard, updated quarterly. We do a comparative policy overview. If you're not aware of this, this is actually an interesting document. And it builds tables for each of the major policy areas of the number policy in each of the RIRs and compares the high-level comparison of the policies. So, new issuance for V6, additional blocks, transfer policy. You can see each of the RIRs and get a high-level summary of how we differ in policies. It is a high-level summary. It's a one quick document that gives the 30,000-foot view. Obviously, when you get closer, each RIR has their own particular issues, but it can be very useful. Within ICANN, we operate as the address supporting organization. The important thing to realize about that is, there we go. The address supporting organization within ICANN, we work with ICANN for 2 things predominantly. One is global number resource policy, and the second one is appointment of people to the ICANN board. Both of those functions are done by a group within the NRO, our NRO Number Council. Within ICANN, that's referred to as the ASO-AC. So we do work within ICANN and their structure predominantly through the ASO-AC. Budget. All of this stuff takes money. Each of the RIRs puts in an amount of money to offset a percentage of the budget. It's based on the total organizational budgets of each. And so the ratios of those build these numbers with AFRINIC 7, APNIC 23, ARIN 29%, LACNIC 10. We adjust these each year as our organizations change. We have general operating expenses, meetings, so on and so forth. We contribute $100,000 a year to IGF, which is the Internet Governance Forum, which gets together annually and has a very significant meeting to talk about internet policy issues. We contribute to ICANN to the tune of $823,000 a year, which is what we've been doing since the first year of ICANN's formation. Because we have an agreement for ICANN to be the IANA numbering services operator through its PTI operation, that money predominantly pays through that, $675. The rest of it is a general contribution the ASO makes to ICANN. So the dollar value hasn't changed over the years, but we have it earmarked in 2 categories. The RIRs also financially, we operate the Stability Fund, the Internet Number Resources Stability Fund. It's a joint RIR pledge. We all have funds in reserve, $2.1 million right now. If an RIR were to have a catastrophic level event financially, this would help. We all have pledged money to make sure that all the RIRs have a backstop if it was necessary. We also have pledged technical resources. So that could happen if one of our headquarters were to be suffer a cataclysmic event. That could happen if one of the organizations were to suffer some untoward financial event. But we are all committed to each other's success and have all pledged commonly so that there's a backstop for an RIR that has an issue. IANA transaction. As I said, we have a service level agreement with ICANN. It's based on the IANA Stewardship Transition Plan. I don't want to go through the IANA Stewardship Transition Plan because that's supposed to be in the past. But at a high level, these services were being done under contract between ICANN and the US government, NTIA. That agreement was allowed to lapse. We had to establish agreement so that the IANA function was being done under our auspices. We have done that, and it was signed at ICANN 56 last year, and the SLA is working fine. You're going to hear later today update from the SLO Review Committee. There's a review committee made up of 3 members from each region that looks at the performance report and make sure that we're getting the performance we're supposed to get for our central registry, our IANA updates to the central pools. Given the very small number of transactions, many of the monthly reports are completely empty. That we requested no transactions, they delivered no transactions, and it was 100% success. On the months where there is a transaction, they report the metrics of how responsive they were, and it's also been 100% success as far as I can tell. But the review committee formally is charged to review their performance and provide advice about continuing, renewing, raising issues on the contract, for example. Review committee members are here from the ARIN region. Louis Lee and Jason Schiller are the 2 members of the community, and there's a staff member from each of the RIR. Nate Davis is the staff member. ICANN accountability. Let's see. Wow. Back when this whole project was started about the US government stepping back and allowing the entire internet system, the DNS, the number registries, to be administered not under the auspices of the US government. A lot of people in the domain community said, we want ICANN to represent us. ICANN will represent the domain community, but we don't trust ICANN completely. We want to improve its accountability before it is the one representing the domain community. And they kicked off a cross-community working group on ICANN accountability. This working group had many deliverables, one of which was changes to ICANN's bylaws, creation of a new empowered community structure within ICANN. Well, now we're in the second half of this work called Workstream 2. And there's still more than half a dozen work groups looking at all sorts of things, SOAC accountability and ICANN's jurisdiction and staff accountability to ICANN. And these groups are continuing to try to improve ICANN and the ICANN system. We have representatives who monitor those groups and report back if there's potential implications for the number system. ICANN empowered community, yeah. So as a result of ICANN, the US government stepping back and the fact that there needed to be an oversight of ICANN and that the board itself wasn't deemed the suitable one, the way that the ICANN board was actually put into office was changed. And now the ICANN board is actually, well, it's recommended by all of the organizations within ICANN, all of the supporting organizations, and the NOMCOM at large. The actual appointments are done by a body called the ICANN Empowered Community. The ICANN Empowered Community is effectively 5 organizations, the ASO is one of them, that serves solely for the purposes of providing a backstop oversight mechanism. In general, we appoint ICANN's directors. If there's a successful petition, we could remove ICANN directors, one or all of them. If there's a petition against an ICANN action, like adoption of a budget, or changing of their bylaws, we can stop that from occurring. It's a fairly rigorous process. It's a fairly extensive process. We need to have procedures for how we do our part. So if, for example, the community says we don't like the budget ICANN's working on, and a member of our community comes to us and says we need to petition to stop that, we would need a way of considering that, how to work it out with you and our advisory council, and how to raise that petition to stop this, raise it with the other members of the empowered community. The other members of the empowered community are folks like the CCNSO and the GNSO and ALAC and the GAC. And so we also need procedures in case one of them raises a petition. One of them could have an objection to an ICANN bylaw change, raise a petition, come to the ASO and say, "Dear ASO, we'd like you to support our petition." This is, there's a lot of paperwork here. There's a lot of procedures. We're in the process of developing procedures. We have interim procedures for doing these things, which also involve consultation with the advisory council, the ASOAC. But the ASOAC is working on its own procedures underneath those. We also know these are interim and we may have to evolve them. There's a bit of overhead in our engagement with ICANN, but it's necessary to some extent because they wanted a backstop that was external to ICANN, that was owned by the community, and we're 1/5 of that backstop. Our accountability. We actually have been looking at our own accountability. If you go online to the NRO, you can find something called a governance matrix, which, much like the policy matrix, summarizes the major governing functions of each of the RIR, how our governing boards are done, how we develop budgets, how we handle disputes, how we handle data protection. It's a summary across all the RIRs. We also did an independent accountability assessment. We actually all hired law firms to look at us to see whether or not each RIR was accountable to its members. Was it appropriately structured? Was it set up so that it could be avoided capture? Could we have a situation where a small, non-representative segment of the community could somehow take over one of the RIRs? You can read the reports. They're all online, the summary reports. We feel this is pretty important. We want to make sure that not only we're running a good operation, but we're governing it correctly and we don't have any undue risks there. ASO review. ICANN bylaws call for a periodic review of each of the supporting organizations. Our agreement with ICANN says the NRO shall provide a review of ASO's effectiveness within ICANN. We conducted one in 2011. In 2016, we actually initiated another one, awarded it to Items International. The final report, we went through a number of consultations. You heard presentations here. The final report just came out actually in August. It has 18 or so recommendations talking about how the ASO can be more effective within ICANN. It's worth reading. The RIR community has opened consultations for implementation of those recommendations. We're open to hearing thoughts about should we implement those recommendations, or any of them good or bad. There was an open consultation. ICANN also opened up a consultation on this. And now we're all at the NRO, we're now looking at the results, trying to figure out, okay, which of these do we implement? Do we do any other changes? And we'll be looking at that. When we have a plan of how to evolve the NRO ASO relationship with ICANN, we will come back to the community with a concrete plan and say this is what we intend to do. Technical projects. RPKI services for all resources. This is fairly interesting. RPKI is a service that allows effectively you to obtain a digital attestation that you're the rights holder to a resource block, and to actually present a signed object about who should be routing that resource block. And it turns out it's based on good old certificates, and there's some standards for those. And the standards for certificates are very cool. One of the provisions in the standards for certificates is that if a certificate authority should overclaim, should say, I'm responsible for all of these certificates, and it turns out it's actually not, then it's possible the whole tree will be invalidated. So it's a pretty fragile situation. It's possible, for example, when an RIR transfers an address block to another RIR, that we have to change our list of all the resources we're responsible. They have to change the list of all the resources they're responsible for, because we're removing one block from ours, they're adding one to theirs. And at the same time, all this has to update in a perfect manner, and if we get it wrong, the entire CA tree for an RIR could go invalid. Now, the RIRs looked at this, and we found this wicked cool, to use a Boston expression. And Jeff Houston nicely wrote it up at the IETF and sent it off to the IETF and said, we really need this fixed, the validation algorithm. They're still mulling that over. There's a lot of discussions. There's even some progress, I'm told. But in the meantime, we don't like the fragility aspect. And so in the meantime, each of the RIRs has set a top-level trust anchor that says, hey, I'm responsible for all resources. RIPE says that, APNIC says that, ARIN says that. We've all rolled out effectively a 0/0 trust anchor for our PKI individually. So when we move resource blocks between each other, there's no chance one of us will be overclaiming and have our whole CA tree thrown out. You can read about it online. We did that transition. It doesn't change anything. If you're using our trust anchor, it's all the same. Everything's underneath. But you look, what's underneath in terms of resources and manifests has all been updated. And that may not be forever. You know, maybe until we have a better algorithm for our PKI. That's a pretty fundamental change, though, because it requires getting down in the weeds in public key infrastructure stuff. IANA PTI reporting requirements, part of the IANA SLA. We have to work with the IANA PTI team, the Public Technical Identifier team at ICANN, to agree on a format for how they report things, and we've done that, and that's worked well. Internet Technology Health Indicators, ITHI consultation. So ICANN kicked off a project, their OCTO, Office of the CTO, kicked off a project to try to measure how is the identifier system working in the internet. DNS, IP addresses, are these registries available, reliable? Are they doing their job? Is there metrics that could be useful in just measuring the overall health? There's initiatives going on within ICANN for the DNS. We had the registration teams within ARIN and the other RIRs all get together and come up with a set of metrics that would apply to the health of the number registry system. We put that out for consultation. We'll be reporting back. This is an ongoing project. If you have thoughts on metrics that should be reported, go take a look at this. It's a fairly significant, and all these activities obviously are heavily coordinated. That's why they're not ARIN projects or RIPE projects, they're NRO projects, because they have to be the same in all the RIRs. And then NRO website revamp. The NRO website is interesting at times to find things on, we actually have improved it significantly, so that's a good step. Thank you. That's the NRO presentation. Questions on this? Yes.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Sorry for the audience that I'll be boring you with my RPKI thing. The RPKI changes that you have done, you claim change nothing. I would question that.
A little more specific. The changes we've done, the NRO changes to change at the top level for a 0/0.
Yes,
okay.
That changes things because you are breaking the RPKI architecture that claims to map the delegation tree.
Right.
More specifically, after you did that, you kind of are pushing the problem of figuring out what potential conflicts are done by the different routes to the relying parties. And that's something that I do not think is welcome by the relying parties. On the other hand, yes, I can see that this move kind of response to years-long questions about, well, okay, what are actually the expected procedures for transferring resources? That's not non-trivial problem. And yes, one could say you have removed that by a trivial thing, but that actually has semantic consequences that are non-trivial.
Right, so stay at the mic. So the change was a workaround. It's a workaround that I agree has semantic changes. For example, it is now possible in RPKI that two RIRs are both saying they're responsible for the same address block. That shouldn't have been possible in RPKI, and now it could. You have trust anchors that point to two different trees, but those two trees have the same object. So my question to you is, I didn't see you on the consultation when this was all happening, but I hear it now. Is it your belief that we should have remained with the existing model of trust anchors and the fragility until such time as it was fixed by the validation algorithm, and that we shouldn't have done this workaround?
Kind of. I have been watching this for not just the past 6 months,
right?
And I would say kind of well, okay, the chance for doing something to improve the situation has passed for a long time, and I would question whether a rapid action right now was really required.
So you're saying this action might not have been really required, and we should not have done it.
I would rather say so, and kind of actually, unfortunately, at the time when you sent out the message, I had personal circumstance that disabled my participation in stuff to a large extent.
So do you think we should roll it back?
Kind of. My understanding is technically we could easily.
Oh, sure.
I would not suggest to do so without some serious discussion, which seems to me has been missing for the action that you took, because you were referring to an timed out internet draft that actually at the time did not get a positive critique except from the authors. Mm-hmm. And the communication for the action that you did seemed to be pretty scarce. Just the other day, I figured I heard one of the people who are active in the area that the news was completely new to them. And I told him, yes, the communication seemed to be essentially John sending a message to the not exactly appropriate IETF working group. And the guy said, yes, well, okay, if it had been on Cider Ops, I would have noted. So, yeah, kind of. I don't want to let this pass without making a statement about it and raising the awareness. I don't see a necessity for changing back right now without thinking and discussing.
Okay, got it. I'm going to go to Jeff in a moment. I just want to respond to one thing. It is true that we informed the IETF after working on an applicability statement that said what we intend to do in the IETF and publishing a draft. We told them not, let's open up discussion about our need to change this. We told them, we are moving to this. You should know that. Now, of course, we did this 4 years after the RPITI validation draft said the current state of affairs wasn't acceptable. And we didn't open the discussion because, well, we had 4 years to discuss it and there was no progress. But I'll take Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
Jeff Houston, APNIC, is someone not unconnected and very connected with this entire setup. Certainly we did indeed try and engage in a useful discussion about working on a hairline of absolute perfection with no margin for error, and our degree of discomfort because that seemed like demanding an awful lot from organisations with humans running the wheels, you know. And our efforts to bend the technology we knew would take time, and this seemed like an appropriate mechanism that would not harm it, but would mitigate that. Now, we consulted, we did indeed push out drafts, we tried to have a conversation about this, and on the feeling that it didn't make good bad, all it did do was make it easier to make things good. This seemed like an appropriate thing for the engineering folk to recommend to the CEOs. Maybe we should do this as a stopgap. As it turns out, the new validation draft is presenting us with some unforeseen circumstances. As anyone who's connected with V6 knows, transitioning from something to something else is never easy.
Right.
And even something as supposedly trivial as a change in validation algorithms is presenting some really weird side effects that, as we work through, we're not sure yet. We know where we want to go, that's easy. We know where we are, that's easy too. Where we are has a different trust anchor scheme to mitigate. We would prefer to be in a different room, but finding the right sequence of actions, Rudiger, is going to require more talk and consultation, and no doubt CyberOps will be intimately involved in that. Thank you.
Carlos?
I wanted to specifically address two of Rudiger's comments. One is regarding, why we are doing this, and as Geoff already said, that there's another draft in the ETF that could really use your input and your help if you care about this. And the second one is the comment about the pushing of conflict resolution towards the relying parties. I want to speak for ARIN or the other areas here, but for LACNIC particularly, the resource certificate was never meant to be an inventory of resources. It's not authoritative. In our case, the resource certificate was a secondary product of the registration database. Resource certificate is not authoritative. If you want to look at our holdings, look at the delegated file. Thank you.
Thank you. It is also true that since the point in time when we announced that we're doing this motion and changed to this mitigation step to make things less fragile, it does seem there's a lot more attention to solving the underlying problem with the IETF, which is most appreciative. Okay. Any other questions on the NRO report? Thank you.